Hey guys, Lucas McNally here, the basketball data nerd behind MainBasketballRankings.com, and welcome to what this is, which is, I guess, a podcast. For the longest time, I had resisted the urge to do a podcast because it felt like a cliche, and it was a thing everyone was doing, and it seemed like a lot of work. And then for a long time, I was anonymous, so it's hard to do a podcast while you're anonymous unless you get like those videos when they're on the news and they have to like have you be all shadowy and you talk in like a robot voice and they're like, I saw the murderer. So anyway, here we are. This is going to be a bit of an experiment. My wife is off camera making fun of me, so that's fun. And we're going to get here in a few minutes. Ethan Snow's going to be in here. He's going to talk about AA and Class D in advance of the title games on Monday. Hoping to get someone else in here to talk about B and C. And yeah, I'll be at the AA games in Portland on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the B games at the Expo, because there's no way they're fitting all those people in the Expo, and I want to see how many people they have to turn away at the door. So enjoy my conversation with Ethan, and subscribe to this and tell your friends and all that nonsense. Thanks. Yeah, and so you are now the answer to a trivia question no one will ever ask. Of if this becomes an actual long-running podcast, you'll be the very first person on it. All right, so
all right. Woohoo!
Right. You look so excited. All right, so I'm here with Ethan Snow. Ethan,
let's go.
Let's do it. Why not? Ethan, he's a Husson graduate. Right. You won. How many gold balls did you win at George Stevens at GSA? I keep meaning to say Georges Valley. And three.
Yeah, three of them. As part of the three-peat from 2016 to 2018. That was a fun time.
That was a fun time, and you were an essential part of that team. You were, what, the manager and stat keeper and all that?
Yep, manager, stat keeper. Basically, if they needed it done, I did it.
You were the guy.
Anyway, I did. My first year, I was a video guy. I filmed all the games, wrote in away, and then moved to the stats role my junior and senior year. Filled the water bottles, make sure the guys were all set, brought their best thing. Your standard manager stuff. And
keep track of Taylor's.
Yeah, they enjoyed having me around, and I enjoyed being around. And that's right.
Someone's got to know how many 3-pointers Taylor Shildreth has hit in that game. So in the game so far, keep him on task.
That's right. Yeah.
And so now you.
Sometimes I lost count, but
there's a lot. It's a lot to keep track of. And then so now you broadcast down in Southern Maine for WHOU. And so you've seen all the AA teams like multiple times this year over the course of the year.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen, saw Deering a lot, saw Oxford Hills a lot, both Oxford Hills teams, saw Portland quite a bit, and did see a couple of the South teams in the quote-unquote South region as well. But, saw them play quite a bit, and that was my first time seeing all those teams play, in person anyway. Like, I've seen them on TV and all that in the past. But seeing all those teams play in person and getting to broadcast games, it was a lot different from the style of basketball that I'm used to. Up here in the northern part of the state, where Class C, a little bit of Class B, Class D, all those teams, a lot of those teams playing. But it was a lot different style of basketball, a fun style of basketball, getting to see down there, and a lot of fun teams this year. It was really fun.
What would you say is the big difference? Style. I mean, there's obviously differences in that there's more size in AA, than you would have with a C school, just because you've got more students to pull from. But like stylistically, what would you say is the big difference between, if someone were to just get transported from a C North game to a AA South game, what would they instantly go, my God? What,
I think just the pace. I mean, there's a lot more, I'm not to diss the talent in the northern part of the state, but you have a pool of players that are division, I would say a lot for the majority, Division III players that you would see at a Division III level of basketball in college. And, when you have, whereas in the North, you might have one of those players for every 3 games. In the down in the southern part of the state in AA, each team might have one or two, maybe three, depending on where you go. So the thing is the pacing, and they're going, especially in the boys side of things, it's go go go. Whereas in the northern part of the state, you might see teams try to slow things down a lot, and that's really what you see. Especially nowadays, you see a lot of teams try to slow down the tempo. There is some teams out there in the north that'll want to keep that fast pace of play, but that is the biggest difference, I would say, is just the pacing. The pacing is just a whole lot faster as a whole in the southern part of the state, especially at the AA level.
Unless it's Falmouth. They're trying to grind you down.
Yeah, unless you're Falmouth. Falmouth will slow it down and try to grind their way to a win for the full 32 minutes. But with the exception of Falmouth, that you'll see that fast tempo pace of play for the most part.
Yeah, that makes sense. I see a lot of B, and because I'm in the mid-coast, so I see a lot of, your Medomix, Oceansides, Camden, those kind of schools. And it's a little bit of a difference. It's probably like in between the two would probably be a good way to describe it. Like the intensity is definitely higher in B than it would be in like a D game. But then I think it's just, probably linear in terms of just the schools are getting bigger, so you got more kids to pull from. And I think it's a big thing is just depth for me in terms and how deep some of the rosters go.
Definitely. You mentioned depth. I mean, yeah, for the most part, down in some part of the state, as you mentioned, the enrollments are bigger. You have a much larger pool to pull from. A lot of those, most, if not all of those schools, with the exception of a handful, have enough for a full, what they call a first team. It used to be a freshman team back when I was, but a first team, and then a JV team, and obviously a varsity team, and every single one of those teams are, you go have our full, 15 guys or girls. And when you have that many on a team, and of course, Bart, you might have that many on a team, but you might only have a rotation of, 6 or 7 guys, maybe. Right. But there's other teams, as you mentioned, the depth. Right. When a team runs 8 or 9 deep, and it's for a steady rotation, that pacing can be higher, where you can get. We'll get into them a little bit, but Portland's a prime example of that. The Bulldogs, they're one of those teams that run 8 or 9 deep, and somebody that they have their starting 5, but they could take out 3 of the guys that start and replace them with 3 guys off the bench that could start are starting caliber players, and that's just. I use Portland for an example because they were one of the prime teams that did that this year. But, that's just as you mentioned, the roster size. That's the biggest thing. And with Portland, that was one of their keys. And that's why I think that's the main reason why they've made it back to the state game. It's just their depth.
I mean, we saw in the A games with Lawrence, like the depth Lawrence had, they got in foul trouble, and then it was Higgins, I think, got in foul trouble, and then they had to bring in Provost. And you're like, my God, that's not helping if you're Brunswick. It's like, oh, great, we got one of their players in foul trouble. Now they're going to bring Provost in off the bench. So is that better?
Yeah, and for Provost, I mean, for a freshman in a state championship game, you got the best game you could have asked out of her. I mean, I saw a lot of tweets before the game was even over with Provost, Miss Maine Basketball 2026. I mean, She performed that well, and I think she was a prime example that the Lawrence girls program is going to be a contender in Class A for the next several years. Like this is the last time we see Lawrence in the next several years. They are going to be in the conversation.
Yeah, and that's one of those programs that they just always have people It's, there's some programs that are sort of very up and down with waves of talent, and they get a good class, and then they're good for a couple of years, and then they're back down, and they're maybe out of the tournament, or they're 8 seed for a couple of years. But Lawrence is just always there. They're a top 4 seed every year. I don't think they've been lower than 4 in the since we've gone to 5 classes. I'm pretty sure they haven't, and it feels like
it's been a while.
It feels like they've been a top 4 seed since Cindy was there. I mean, I might be missing a couple years because, I'm old and forget everything. But it does feel like they've been there forever. And it's just one of those programs that, like, if you told me, there's maybe, 10, 15 programs where if you said to me, oh, they graduated 6 kids, I'm going to go, oh, that's terrible for them. So they're going to be the 5 seed next year? Like, you've got Lawrence is one of those, and Hamden is usually one of those. Madomic, Brewer feels like it's getting to that point. George Stevens is probably a good example. Caribou. You just got those programs that you're just like, well, they just have a feeder system, and it's all because there's a youth program there that's just continually feeding talent into that, and just the next teams are ready to the next kids are ready to step up when it's their turn. And I think that's what we're seeing with Lawrence, and we're going to keep seeing that, I would assume. I'm sure they've got someone in the 8th grade who's ready to play major minutes next year. All right.
Absolutely. So we'll be obviously defending state champs. You're always keeping.
Yeah. So let's start talking about AA. Okay. So we got in the boys. Let's start with the girls' game. We have Oxford Hills and we have Gorham. Who they played once this year. They played on February 2nd, and Oxford Hills blew them out because that's what Oxford Hills has done to a lot of people this year, is blow them out. Now, I think you know more. You followed Gorham more than I have. I kind of wrote them off in like late January because they've had injuries, and I can't remember all the injuries, but I know they've had a lot of injuries this year, and it sort of felt like, well, they had a shot, and then everybody got hurt, and so that sucks. Try again next year. But here they are. They're in the state game, and they were unbelievable against Cheverus. Did they play Cheverus? These games are all
they absolutely. Thornton.
Thornton, yeah, that's right.
Played Thornton.
Okay, I saw too many games, man. Yeah. I saw like 40 games in 6 days.
No. Yeah, I can see how they could all blend together.
You get to like the 9 o'clock game, and you're like, what did I see this morning?
Absolutely. But Gorham is an interesting team because, as you mentioned, they were playing with a lot of injuries this year. And I believe in that game where they played Oxford Hills late in the regular season, I think 2 of their starters were out with either illness or injury. So it was a blowout win. It was a blowout win in favor of Oxford Hills.
Is it 2 of the current starters, or because they lost starters? Like, did someone tear someone tore like an ACL, right?
Yeah, I can't remember who it was, but I know that they were missing a couple of starters. I'm not sure if they were out for that night or what it was, but they were missing a couple of key players that I think they do have.
I feel like Ellie Gay might have been out for that game. I think Ellie Gay was out.
She very well might have been. Yeah, she very well might have been. Gorham, as you mentioned, Gorham is an interesting team. I mean, they went 9-9 in the regular season, and you say normally when you see a team go 9-9, if you're taught 9-9 and say like Class B or C, you're going to get a prelim game, and maybe you win. You're going to get maybe a home prelim game, but most likely you're going to be on the road. But they're in AA, in AA girls, there was only 7 teams this year. So I mean, there was only 7 teams this year. So it really didn't matter where Gorham finished. They were going to, you're locked in the playoffs, you're in the quarterfinals, and I think that's where Gorham had I think that's where it kind of played into their advantage, because you could have that mindset of, hey, listen, ladies, no matter what our record, we're going to be in the playoffs. So let's just focus on playing, on getting better every day, so that we're playing our best basketball by the end of the year. And yeah, they went 9-9. Thornton again in front of them in the regular season because Massachusetts didn't feel the team. They played them 5. Thornton beat them 3 times in the regular season, and then Gorham, they got hot at the right time, and they're still hot at the right time. And they won their quarterfinal. They were the 3 seed, so they got a home quarterfinal. They won that. They took on a Stanford team who they went neck up the entire regular season, and it took overtime to get them, but they did shut down Stanford, so who was the 2 seed, and then they went toes to toes with Thornton, and it came all the way down to the end. But Ellie Gay has been one of the top players in the tournament. I would argue Ellie Gay has been one of the hottest players in not only in Double-A but in the state as well during the tournament. I mean, you put her right up there with Elise McNair and Sierra Carson when you're talking just girls tournament in general. I mean, she's been the lead force for the Rams to come back to the state championship game. And there's been a lot of layover. It's going to be a lot of layover. What, 12 days between games, between
Something
the regional
like that, yeah.
final and the state championship tomorrow. But it'll be interesting how they come out against Oxford Hills. But Oxford Hills should not be overlooking Gorham. I mean, they're in the state game for a reason. They're playing the best basketball at the right time. They beat a team in the regional final that had beat them 2 times in the regular season. And I hope Gorham. I'm obviously I'm not going to say Gorham is a favorite, but I don't think they're the underdogs that a lot of people probably think they are.
You think the model is underselling them a little bit? The model's got them as a 14-point underdog. So you would take if you were
I would say
for entertainment purposes, of course, we wouldn't put any actual money on this, of course, but you would take Gorham in an over-under scenario there.
I think I would, just from the eye test, when you know the test in there, I would say Gorham would be I'd say between 5 and 7. 5 and 7 point underdog compared to what the model's got them at in 14.
Yeah, and I think, the model's obviously looking at that 9-9 record and going, all right. And Oxford Hills has been, destroyer of worlds for most of the season. And they had that second half I'm sure we'll talk about that when we get to Oxford Hills. But let's talk about Oxford Hills. So they had the second half. They had this insane second half of the season where they had to play. It was something like, and I should have this in front of me, and if I was better at this, then I would have notes. And I would have made notes and I would have prepared and I would have remembered who they played in the regional final. But, first episode, right? So they had this schedule where they played like 8 of 9 of their 9 games were against teams in the top 10. And they had like this first half schedule. They had the easiest first half schedule in all of Double-A, and I think the easiest half schedule of anybody above B. I think only like Oceanside had an easier first half schedule than Oxford Hills, and then they had the hardest second half schedule in the whole state. So they sort of had to go through this gauntlet of teams, and they only dropped 1, and they've been pretty dominant. I mean, we saw them in the tournament that went double overtime. But that was one of the few times they've been really tested this year. Brunswick gave them a little bit of a run for their money. And then, of course, the game they lost. But they've been, as the kids say, they've been a wagon.
Yeah, they absolutely have. And you mentioned that second half schedule where they had to play Cheverus twice. They met in the regional final. They played Bangor twice. Tender in Double-A North. They met Brunswick, who just lost the state game to Lawrence. They met Gorham, who they're playing again in the state championship game. And so Oxford, with the exception of those 2 games against Cheverus, they really look easy. I mean, You mentioned they had a little bit of trouble with Brunswick, but they ended up getting over them. They really didn't have any trouble with Bangor in the 2 games that
And
they played them.
It took quite a bit for Brunswick to make that a game. Like, they were down. I went to that game, and they were down. Brunswick was down 12 or so late, and they went on like a 10-0 run, like a Dakota Shipley-fueled 10-0 run, which I kept waiting for them to do against Lawrence. And that's a whole different discussion about what happened in that game. But they went on this run to get it close, and then Sierra Carson just sort of shut the door on them.
Yeah, and that's why she's a Miss Maine basketball finalist for a reason, right? I mean, Sierra Carson, Carson is one of those seniors. Now, every single senior that's playing this year has had a very interesting basketball career over the past 4 years. I mean, your freshman year normal, and she was part of that 2020 state championship team for Oxford Hills as a freshman.
Mm-hmm.
Then you don't get a tournament the next year. I mean, you're playing a regional schedule.
The COVID Cup.
Last year there was a tournament. Yeah, the COVID Cup. Obviously, last year you had a semi-normal regular season with the tournament. Obviously, it wasn't quite the same. You had some.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's policies were a little bit different depending on where you went. But and then that brings it all the way to our senior year. For basketball season, and they're right back into the championship game. But she, along with the other seniors on that team, have just had I would describe it as just a roller coaster ride. I mean, you go from the highest of highs in 2020 winning that state game, and then you go to the lowest of lows less than a year later when you don't get a normal season. And so for them to fight all the way back to get to the championship game again is just it for that senior class. It just shows that no matter the adversity thrown their way, they were able to overcome and get to the state game. Now, also we talking about Sierra Carson. They got as well, and Ella Pelletier coming into her own very quickly. I mean, she's been combine her with Sierra Carson. That has been one of the biggest 1-2 punches in the entire state. And as only a sophomore, Ella Pelletier is going to be a player to watch the next 2 seasons.
She's going to be a force.
No matter the result tomorrow night. Yeah, she's going to be a force to be reckoned with. I mean, with the size that she is and just the way she handles herself, I mean, I would almost compare her to the skill set that she has. You can put her on the floor and she's going to score for you. I mean, that's any team's dream, a player or two like that.
Mm-hmm.
And for Oxford Hills, they have that in Ella Pelletier. And another dark horse player on that Oxford Hills team that she's been quiet at times, but there'll be times when she'll come up big when you need her. That's Tristan Derenberger, and we saw that.
I mean,
in the first Chevers game in the regular season, it was like 6 or 8 pointers that she went off in that first. I was at home, and then she was kind of quiet in that second game, and she was even quiet in the regional final last Saturday. She came alive when they needed her the most, and she hit.
Yeah,
until she wasn't.
2 threes in overtime.
She hits back-to-back threes in double overtime. They give them, to back-to-back threes in double overtime, and that ended up being the difference maker for us to do.
It really looked like they were going to lose that game in the second overtime because it looked like Chevers had it in the bag, and we were going to start to play the free throw game. And she hit those, and so Carson had the steal, and then Derenberger hit the 3, and then she hit another 3, and all of a sudden Chevers is like, and this is all the final minute. All of a sudden Chevers is like, oh no. That was a bit of a gut shot for them, I think. And then, anytime.
And for Chevers, I mean, this.
Did I lose you there? Oh, no. I thought I lost you there for a second.
You got to go ahead.
Yeah, and with Pelletier, anytime you've got a Pelletier on a roster, it's one of those names where you're like, well, I think we should probably guard that one. That's like you don't even need to scout. You're like, well, I see a Pelletier, so we're definitely don't leave them open. And it's like if you're in Central Maine and you see a Bessie on the roster, you're like, let's keep an eye on that person. Let's not give them too much room to work with. We don't really need to. We don't need a scouting report on really anything. We're just like we're gonna guard them. We're not gonna let them get too much.
Don't matter if
leeway.
Don't matter if this is the first time. Just get the first time. Just at all times.
Yeah, and it's like there's a freshman that says Pelletier. We'll just to be safe. All right, so let's move on to the boys' game. We have the classic AA matchup of Portland and South Portland. They played once this year on February 9th. They finished the season with their only matchup, and I'm not sure why they only play one time. It's Portland and South Portland. Like, what are we doing here? But South Portland won 47-46. So if you just based on that one, make a prediction, it looks like we might have a really good one there. The model has Portland by 8.5 because it kind of thought, pretty sure it thought Thornton Academy was going to be there. And they almost were until the basketball gods got involved with the shot and that whole nonsense. And probably the game that's going to give us replay in the near future, I would think. So let's talk about Portland. You talked about them a little bit. They've got some depth. They've got the big guy down low. He had a fantastic regional final. He was just a monster. I can't even pretend to pronounce his name. So he was the tournament MVP. He had something like 18 rebounds and 24 points, something like that, in the regional final. But yeah, and they've got, I thought was really fun about Portland was you had this team and then you had this scrappy little point guard, number 3. And he looked like he was not a guy who puts up with anything. Like there was a moment where he was going to go start a fight. And do you remember that in that game where he got bumped or something? Or he got fouled pretty hard, and he was ready to go. He was ready to throw down, and the big guys all had to hold him back. But I thought we were about to have a second fight of the tournament.
Yeah, Brady.
Is that
Brady
a normal
Toller.
thing for him? Yeah, that's it.
Brady Toller. He's a heck of a ball player. He's more of a soccer player than he is a basketball player. He was one of the top standouts on the Portland soccer team the past few years, but. Toller, to quote a certain media member that I've worked with this past winter, he's a little bit of a head case, but it works for him. And he's he's for as small as he is, he's a great ball handler, and he's been a big part of that Portland Bulldog squad that is back in the state final. But a lot going along with what you were also saying, Jesse Camus had the game I can only describe as a game of his life. I mean, he had. I believe he had more rebounds than he did points. It was like 19 points, 21 rebounds. But Oxford Hills had no answer for him. And Camus, for the handful of times that I saw Camus play in the regular season, Oxford Hill. I saw Portland play Oxford Hills once in the regular season. They played twice. I saw one of the games, and they did have an answer for him. I mean, Oxford Hills had a lot of size underneath as well between Lincoln Merrill and Holden Shaw. But for some reason in that regional final last Saturday, they had no answer for him because he was gobbling up every rebound and getting the buckets to fall when they needed him to. And he was the biggest factor for Portland to get over Oxford Hills. Now, Portland, I wanted to mention as well, for those who haven't been paying attention, but Portland lost to Lewiston twice on the regular season, beat him in the semifinals by 6. And then in the regional final, they had lost to Oxford Hills in the 2 games in the regular season, and they came around and they beat him in the regional final. And then, but I've heard a lot of people say this about the Portland Bulldogs. That's the way of basketball. They will. It doesn't matter who their opponent is. They'll always play a close game, and they'll always make it. They'll always play a close game. I mean, they just barely stuck by Wyndham in the quarterfinals. They beat, I think it was a
Yeah.
3-point game against Wyndham, who was the 7th seed, and they made a way. They got by Lewiston, they got by Oxford Hills, and they're back into the state final for the first time since 2017. So Portland has a lot of depth, and that's what makes them so dangerous, is that they have 2 or 3 guys on the bench that are starting caliber on that team, but they just rotate them in as 6th, 7th, 8th guys, and they're still just as dominant.
How much do you think in that regional final? Like, it looked to me, and not knowing anything, having any real information other than just sitting up in that crow's nest at the hockey rink, they looked distracted to me. They looked like they had not mentally gotten past the fight and the suspension from the day before. Would you say that's probably? Did you get that sense?
It definitely looked like. Yeah, no, I definitely did. It definitely didn't feel like that because just their entire a Oxford Hills team that just looked. They were high octane. They were high scoring. They looked like a well-oiled machine for really the entire all of their games. I mean, I got to see the first time they played Cheverus on the regular season. They rolled over them. I mean, and they rolled over them. Obviously, they played 2 close games with Portland on the regular season, but really, with the exception of a loss to Lewiston, which they were missing Cole Pokanen, they rolled over everybody. I mean, they did not play many close games on the regular season that were realistically close. The score might have been closer than what the game actually was, but for a team that had so many top scorers on that team, that has so many top scorers, Tegan Pelletier, Cole Pokanen, you might get it's not uncommon to get a double-double from both Lincoln Merrill and or Holden Shaw, and Eli Soren can get points on the board as well. Pokanen had 12 points, and the majority of those came in the fourth quarter when it didn't matter. I mean, Tegan Pelletier, single digits, Eli Soren, single digits.
Yeah, I mean, that really felt like
Pelletier.
At the end of January, if you would, taken a poll, that looked like Grafham's first gold ball was, pretty not likely, but maybe, very much in play. They were one of the favorites for sure. And they really looked like a different team from the regional final to the semifinal. It was a little alarming. And I mean, that seems to be the big thing you'd look at is that fight. And they were down a player, which deservedly, because you got to suspend a kid after that. Thankfully, they suspended the right kid, and that was a whole thing. Were you there for that? You were there for that, right? You for the Zapruder footage at the hockey
I did
rink?
not see the fight. I was across town. I was across town working games at the Expo. I was working the A and B South regional finals. I was at the Expo, but I saw the video of it pretty soon after it happened, and it was. I mean, they lost Jake Carson, who didn't get a lot of minutes off the bench for Oxford Hills. But when something like that happens to a team, I mean, it rattles you, especially when they had to play
the next
less
day.
than 24 hours after that happened. Right, exactly. And it's
you almost wonder if they'd had another day, if they'd had a practice in between those 2 games, if it's a different story. But it was pretty fun. In terms of covering it.
Yeah.
In terms of covering it, you had like.
Yeah, I think if they definitely do get.
Yeah, you had what, like 6 people huddled around the WHOU monitors courtside, and Isaac Lucan's just running it back and forth on a loop for people, and then they'd bring more people in, and then you got the MPA guys are coming over to look at it, and then they're bring the ref back. The ref's looking at it, and they're just like going frame by frame through this fight footage. And I'm like, I really got to get going if I'm going to make it up to Augusta in time, but I really want to see how this all plays out. So it was something. All right, let's talk about South Portland. They've got Jalen Jackson. I think I said that right. Has had is 3 game winners this year. He had 1 against Bonnie Eagle.
Yeah, 3 Yeah, Bonnie Eagle, Gorham, and Portland. And it was 3 of the last 4 games of the regular season.
Yeah, the February 9th game. Okay.
So, I mean, I think South Portland is one of those teams. I think a lot of people. Obviously they're the defending state champions, but they lost losing a key member to greener pastures and JP Estrella.
Yeah, that's a big loss.
I mean, I think a lot of people thought that maybe they would be the bridesmaid to Thornton, and it definitely seemed like it was going to set up that way. But South Portland, they got hot at the right time. Jalen Jackson, game winners over Bonnie Eagle, game winner over Gorham, game winner against Portland, all in the final seconds in the last 3 of the last 4 games of the regular season. And South Portland, they earned themselves the 2 seed, racking up all those heel points towards the end of the year, and they really rolled through the tournament. They got an easy win in the quarterfinals over Sanford, and then I would say out of all the AA semis, they had the easiest matchup. They got Scarborough, who upset Gorham in the quarters, and they rolled over Scarborough, and they go into that game against Thornton Academy, and they really controlled that whole game. There was never really a point where I thought Thornton was a serious threat. I mean, they kept the score close, but you never really got that sense that Thornton was going to. There was never really a sense that Thornton was going to win that game, especially in that second half. I mean, it just seemed like it was South Portland's night that night.
It felt like the basketball gods were not going to let them advance, and they certainly, because as we all know, they lost the game against Bonnie Eagle. Let's be honest, and the refs blew the call, and we couldn't replay it, and that seems like that's probably not going to be a thing going forward. But it really felt to me like the basketball gods were like, nope, you're done. We'll take it from here, guys. It was a ball don't lie situation. They shot something like 10% from 3. It was a really off night from 3, and it, like you said, South Portland controlled that game, so you don't want to take any credit away from them, but they definitely earned that win. And that they were a major reason why they shot so badly from 3. But you never really got the sense that Thornton was going to make a run in that one. So
you never did. I mean, as mentioned. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so tell me a little bit about, I've only seen South Portland once in that regional final. So what is there, is it a defense? It looks like a defensive-minded team to me that, sort of grinds you out and doesn't do a ton in the half court. And a lot of their offense maybe comes out of transition and off of, turnovers. Would that be
it definitely does. Yep, that would definitely be an accurate description. I think I would argue the playing styles between Portland and South Portland are very similar. I think that's what's going to make that game tomorrow night such an intriguing matchup, is that they have very similar playing styles. South Portland's one of those teams that will slow things down. They will grind it out. They will make you work on the defensive end, and they will wait for a good shot. And it all starts with Jalen Jackson. I mean, he had 17 points in that regional final victory over Thornton. Between him, Ben Smith, he was in double figures as well, and Jaden Kim, who was up there, who was nearly in double figures. But it all starts with Jalen Jackson. He is going to make you – he is going to make you pay if he gets hot at the right time. And in my opinion, I think he was a snub for a finalist for Mr. Basketball. I know he's a semifinalist. He was not a finalist.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by that.
He is definitely taking control of the South Portland team. And, hey, if he gets hot at the right time, he will make you pay. So it should be the offense runs through him. If you could take him out of his game, you got a good chance of winning. But if you let him get hot, good luck to you.
So what I'm hearing is this is going to be a great argument for a shot clock, this game.
I think so. I think it'll be
great.
And again, Portland is one of those teams that likes to switch it up a little bit. They'll go fast. They'll like to slow things down. They'll like to alternate. South Portland, I think, to counter that is going to want to try to keep it as low scoring as possible, and you saw that in their one regular season matchup. I mean, neither team got to what was it, 47, 46 or something
It
like
was
that. No, it
47
wasn't
to
the
46.
highest scoring.
Yeah.
It wasn't the highest scoring game. Yeah, 47, 46. It wasn't the most highest scoring game out there, and
Portland grinds it down. Like they were one of the lowest scoring teams in. They might have been the lowest scoring team in AA. They were up there in terms of not in terms of like offensive inability, maybe like just pace. If we had pace numbers, I feel like their per 100 possessions would be better. Their offense would look better per 100 than what it looks like now. But as it is now, they just don't score very often. And you're saying you think that's
and
by
it's
design.
worked for them. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it definitely is. It is by design. I mean, they'll work it. They work it around. I mean, they have plenty of guys that can score. It's just hasn't been their playing style this year, and they've won. They're one of those teams they prefer to slow it down. They prefer to, not almost kind of like what Falmouth like to kind of like what Falmouth like to do this past year, but a lot of times they take a lot of good shots. There's just a lot of games where they couldn't quite get them to fall, and as you saw in that regional final, a lot of work takes place down underneath. When you have a big man like Jesse Candace underneath, he's going to clean up a lot of those. He's going to clean up
He
a lot of
solves
those.
a lot of
misses.
problems
You
for
saw
you
that in the
defensively.
regional final. Oh, it definitely does. I mean, you have South Portland has a little bit of size to them, but not a lot. I definitely think Portland is bigger off the top of my head. Portland is definitely
Yeah, I
bigger.
would say that.
But South Portland does have a little bit of size as well, and it's gonna be interesting to see how South Portland. I think South Portland's got to control the game from beyond the arc. That's how they're going to. That is how they're going to be able to try to. That's how they're going to be able to be in that. Try to be in that game is try to control the game from beyond the arch. Get Jesse Camus out of it. If you can get Camus in foul trouble, fantastic. You take your big man out. You take Portland's big man out, and you'll get to settle it among your guards. So I think that's going to be a big key for South Portland to try to control the game from the arch, get Camus out of the game.
Okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. So I'm going to boy, do I want to have you make predictions on who wins, or should I have you pick against the model spread? What do you think? You want to do over under, or you want to pick a winner?
I'll see if I'll go against the model. I'm feeling.
All right, let's do that.
I'll go against the model.
That's safer. All right, so we got Portland by 8.5. So what do you got there?
Portland by 8.5. I think South Portland will cover that easily.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be a 2 or 3 point game.
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe bet. But then, so what happens usually with the model is anytime I look at a number and I'm like, oh no, that's wrong. What'll happen here is Portland will win by 8. It'll nail it. It'll usually when I'm like, no, definitely wrong, it usually nails it. It did that earlier this year with the Brunswick girls in Greeley. It had like 18 or something for Brunswick, like Brunswick by 18 or 20, and I'm like, what? That's crazy. It's Greeley. There's no way Greeley's losing by that much. And they won by exactly the number the model said. I was like, yeah, this shows what I know. Okay, so girls, Oxford Hills by 14.5. As Oxford Hills, if they get hot from 3, they'll beat anybody by 14.5. 14.5 is low if they get hot from 3. If Sierra Carson is locked in,
they will. And
then they might win by 40.
Yeah, if this game was played if this game was played Saturday night like it was supposed to be, I would have said Gorham would cover almost in a heartbeat. But I think Oxford Hills. I think Oxford Hills will cover that. I think so? They're just going to be. I think it's all going to depend on how well they come out of the gate. If Carson is on her game, you get Darrenberger involved, you get Pelletier involved as well, and you can keep all 3 of those. If you can keep all 3 of those players out of foul trouble, Pelletier fouled out in overtime, and they still managed to win. But that was a big loss at the time. But if you can keep all 3,
that really looked like that was going to do it.
All 3 of those players, if you can keep all 3 of those players involved, I think Oxford Hills will cover that 14.
Cool. All right, so let's talk about Class D real quick. To cover them. My dog's trying to jump on me. All right, so girls' game, we have Seacoast Christian and Southern Aristic. Yes, hi, Buckley. Yeah, hi. He wants to be in the video. Yes, hi, I know. Okay, so Seacoast Christian, and speaking of depth, Seacoast Christian has 6 kids. Did you see the Forest Hills game? What was that? That was the semifinals.
I saw bits and pieces. I didn't watch the
Okay.
full game, but I did see bits and pieces of that game.
So in that game, Winship was in foul trouble. She had 4 fouls for the entire fourth quarter. Leach, I think, also had 4 fouls, and somebody else had 4 fouls for most of the fourth quarter. So they've only got 6 kids. They only sub in 4 of them play the entire game because they've just got the 5th player on the in the starting lineup. I forget her name. She just subs in and out with the player on the bench. And that's their substitution pattern, which is great if you're scoring the game because it's real easy to keep track of who's playing, who's in the game. But they had 4 players. 3 of their 4 main rotation people, you could say, have 4 fouls for the last 5 minutes of the game. And Winship nearly fouled out like 6 times. And so at the end, they're just standing straight up, not guarding anybody because they're just terrified to foul out of the game, and still Forest Hills couldn't score. The fans were losing their goddamn minds at every call that went against Forest Hills. It was one of the most entertaining games of the tournament. Like these fans, like the ball, like if a Forest Hills player like straight up threw the ball out of bounds, nowhere, drop kicked it into the stands. That was a terrible call. They were like, "Are you kidding me, ref? You clearly bounced off of somebody else." And you're like, "Guys, chill. You gotta chill. You really do." So that's a team with no depth. If they get in foul trouble, they're in a lot of trouble against Southern Aristic. And you were at the game last year when Southern Aristic, they were up like 30-something to nothing. That Dyer Brook program is just ridiculous.
It was not a pretty game. That was a game that was over. Unfortunately, it was over halfway through the first quarter. I mean,
right.
It took Seacoast almost 16 minutes just to score their first basket. I think it was 40-something to 4 at halftime, and it was unfortunately a game that was over by halfway through the first quarter. And you never want to see that in a state championship game. Mm-hmm. But for Seacoast to get back to the state game, that's fantastic, especially to only do it with 6 players. And for me, I grew up watching Deer Isle Stonington play because they're fairly close to where I'm from. So they're a Class D school, and so it's something I'm kind of used to seeing. But because personally, I love it seeing a team, Class D, seeing a team with 6 players go all the way to the state game. That's amazing. That's awesome.
It's great
to see.
Yeah, it's a real Hoosiers vibe.
And no, it absolutely is, and it's going to be. I think. Seacoast, it's pretty much the same team going back to the state game. I think maybe 1 or 2 seniors from that maybe graduated.
Not a lot of roster turnover there in general.
It wasn't many. It was not a whole lot of roster turnover, and there's going to be that team is going to be out for blood. They are going to remember that trouncing last year. It's going to be fresh in their minds, and if for Seacoast. And for Seacoast, it's going to be trying to come out and playing the hardest that you can, do your absolute best to shut down the top scorers. Maddie Russell, you got the Shield sisters on the team that'll score points for Southern Aristic. But for Seacoast, the key to the game is just going to be come out, play the hardest you can, and try to stay out of foul trouble. You cannot run into foul trouble like they did against Forest Hills because unfortunately Southern Aristic will make you pay. Southern Aristic has just got too many players that can score the buckets. They just got too many players. You cannot afford to fall into foul trouble. So for Seacoast, it's going to be interesting to see how they fare out, how they fare against Southern Aristic. I would like to see it be I would like to see it be a whole lot closer. I think a lot of people would like to see it.
We all want to see it be closer.
I think they are going to. I think they are good. I think they will be playing a whole lot. It will be a closer game. I mean, You look at Ellie Leach, 37 points in the regional final. Recklin Winship, 21 points. If Leach and Winship can be on their game again like they were in the regional, it's going to be interesting. They will make it an interesting game.
All right. So then on the boys' side, we got Forest Hills and Mason Desjardins, and I don't know, like, are there more? How many more Desjardins are there? Is it just I have a two-part question about the Desjardins thing. One, how many more are there? And is it all one? Are we talking? Is it a cousin situation? Is it one family? Are they all brothers? It feels like I've been watching a Desjardins kid score 40 points at the Civic Center for the last 30 years. I'm not sure what's happening. I just feel like there's always been a Desjardins who's lights out from three, and I just am wondering what's going on there. See, at Madomic, we have the stars, and there's, it's Jaden Starr, and he might be the last. There's more. I think there's more coming. There's like 800 of them, but they're cousins, and brothers and cousins, and it's a whole ecosystem that there's just always one on the team. And I feel it's that way with the Desjardins kids, except for they shoot 3-pointers instead of scrappy defense. So the question, that's my one question, is how many more are there, and then is he enough? He and Cooper Daigle, can they score enough to hang with Southern Rustic?
Well, once again, you have a rematch last year just to start things off. But as far as the amount of Desjardins there are in Jackman, I really have no idea. I mean, they could just keep pumping them out at this rate. I mean, we could be seeing a Desjardins score 35 to 40 at the Civic Center for another 10 to 15 years. You just
for
never
the rest
know.
Of our lives.
In Jackman, Maine, I've never been to Jackman before, but I think I know enough about Jackman that there's only two things they do out there. That's ride snowmobiles and play basketball. And
they drive the snowmobiles to the basketball games. Yeah, there's like all of Jackman shows up for these games.
The basketball games.
Yeah. I think it's going to be.
And they have a great.
I think the world's going to come to an end, and we're still going to have a Desjardins scoring 30 at the Civic Center, like as the world burns from climate change. It's going to be just a big fireball, and you look up, you're like, oh well, look at that, the Desjardins kid scored 42 again in the final basketball game of the world. So Southern Rustic, they've got Burpee, right? It's Burpee, right? That sounds right.
Yeah, Dylan Burpee.
Yeah.
They got
Dylan Burpee.
They had two Burpee. Yeah, they had two Burpee brothers on that team last year. Now they only got one. But they also got another. But they also have a younger brother, Brennan Burpee. He doesn't play a lot right now, but he's still going to be. Yeah, they got pair of brothers.
It's an endless supply.
Drake Weston on the team.
I've been to Dyer Brook a lot, so I know a lot about Dyer Brook because we have a hunting camp there. And I've never run into a Burpee in Dyer Brook in all my time there, so I'm not sure what's going on. But it does feel like the same way, where they've just got like this endless string of kids coming through. But he almost had, so in the regional final, if I'm remembering correctly, he nearly broke the single game 3-point record, right? Am I thinking of the right game?
I believe so. So he had 5 3-pointers. Him and Drake Weston combined for 11 threes in the regional final against Machias. He had 5 of them. Weston had 6. If we're talking, I don't know, they probably don't keep track of records for 2 players officially, but that's got it for probably, 2 players combined. That's got to be. I mean, for as far as team records go, I'm not sure what the Class D North team record for a game is, but they must have come close. They must have come pretty close.
I'm thinking of girls. The girls' record is like 20. Something like that for Class D. Because I remember looking at it when I was looking at it's either girls or boys, but it's like 20. And because I was looking at the night that Lawrence and Brewer made a run at those records. Brewer got there and Lawrence just stopped shooting because they were up by like 80. And I remember looking down through the list, and I'm like, what? 20? Are you kidding me? How is that possible? And it was not like last year. It was like 6 years ago or something. But all those records are going to get demolished in the next 5 years anyway. So, all right. So I didn't write down the models picks, and I'm not sure what happens if I go off of this window, my computer. So we'll just pick these games straight up. All right. So Seacoast and Southern Rustic. What do you got?
So I'm going with Southern Rustic in this one. I think just their depth and the amount of scores that they have, because they got three players that could score in double digits with the snap of the fingers. I mean, obviously you still got Matty Russell, who's been a key player on that team for the past several years. Remember, Southern Rustic's in their 5th straight state game. Matty Russell has been a key factor in the past couple. And then you got Maddie Shields and Allie Shields, who will make some noise as well, and also Cammy Shields. You have 3 Shields sisters on that team that'll make either cousins, sisters, or something that'll make some noise. So you have 3 or 4 players on that team that can score in the double digits with ease, and I think they will, despite the fact that I think Seacoast will keep it a little bit closer than last year. I think just ultimately Southern Rustic's depth is going to be what will lift them to another state championship.
All right, and now boys, Forest Hills, Southern Rustic. You think Southern Rustic gets a sweep? What do you think?
I do believe I initially picked the Southern Rustic sweep, and I'm going to stick with that.
All right.
So last year, I'm just thinking about the last year's state game, and it was an interesting game. So. Like Southern Rustic jumped out. They led by as much as 30 at one point, and they ended up winning by like 20 or 25. So scoreboard-wise, it wasn't that close. But Forest Hills went on this crazy run in the third quarter. They got a 30-point lead. They whittled it all the way down to like 12 or 11 points in the third quarter alone. So it was Forest Hills is one of those teams. For at least last year, and there wasn't a whole lot of roster turnover from last year to this year. But Forest Hills is just another one of those teams that you let Mason Just Jardins get hot. I mean, we've seen it plenty of times. Mason Just Jardins could drop 35 to 40 with the snap of a finger. So yeah. I think that game is going to be the better of the 2D games. I think Southern Rustic will pull it out. But I think Forest Hills is going to hang with them all the way through till probably the final seconds. I would not be at all surprised if that game comes down to either free throws or possibly the final shot. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
I mean, if Desjardins gets hot, then there's just no telling. You just think – you watch him for 2 minutes, and you're like, this kid's just a ticking time bomb of a 50-point game. You're just sort of waiting for it to happen. And I think a lot of the times in their games aren't close enough for him to really go off. And you wonder how high he could go. There was an element of that in which game did I see? I think it was the Seacoast game because they were playing. Yeah, they sort of blew out Seacoast, and it was a little bit of he was so hot in the first half that you're just thinking, you know what the hell was sportsmanship, man? Just go as high as you can go. I want to see how many points, how many threes can you hit, how many, how high can this, how much damage can you put in the record book? Because it feels weird that there's not the Class D record book doesn't have Desjardins in it for 3-point shooting in the tournament for Class D, but I mean, who knows? All right, so that I think that covers it. Do you want to add anything? Do you want to promote anything to the 5 people who will watch this?
If whoever's listening, just enjoy the state championship games because this is the biggest stage from my opinion. The basketball state championship games are the biggest stage for any sport offered at the high school level in the state of Maine. So get out there, enjoy it. Enjoy the student athletes because we are seeing the best of the best for this basketball season as we do every year, and just get out and enjoy it because it's the best time for me. It's the best time of the year. I mean, what can go? I mean, it's high school basketball in the state of Maine. I mean, it's great stuff to watch. The communities will be out there. So hopefully, despite the games being on the weeknights now, hopefully we'll still see a strong community turnout from all points of the state because there's going to be a lot of travel for a lot of teans. So
I'm sure
just get out there and enjoy it. Oh,
Jackman's got they got the snowmobiles all gassed up.
I think you could play a game at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I think the entire town of Jackman will show up.
Yeah.
Heck, you can play the D State game at 4 Kent, and they'll still be there.
100%. 100%. Maybe not. They might not want to go to Portland, but they'll definitely go to Fort Kent. All right. Thank you so much for doing this. And I will probably see you're going to be at the games on. You're going to be at what? Portland games? Yeah.
So I will be. Originally I was supposed to be doing both D and C games, but it's been worked out now. I'll be in Bangor for the D games Monday night, and then I'll be at the Expo Tuesday night for the B games.
All right, cool. I'll probably see you then. I'm going to go to the Expo because I don't believe that they're going to be able to fit all the people there. It's a 3,000 seat venue, and I think that's 4 programs that draw really well in a state game, and yeah, I just don't see them fitting everybody there. I'm going to get there super early so I can get in and claim my seat next to Don Shields and see how many people get turned away. All right, thank you so much for doing this.
I was expecting. Yep, thank you, sir.